body say, "I am here, I belong, and I am not to be underestimated." The small adjustments in posture, the way your shoulders relax yet stay square, the subtle alignment of your spine, the grounded placement of your feet can dramatically alter the way others perceive you. Presence begins with owning your physical self in a way that feels natural but communicates authority without words. Movement is another critical aspect of presence. People are drawn to those who move with intention. Rapid, erratic, or nervous movements signal anxiety, uncertainty, or lack of control. Smooth, deliberate, and measured motions convey calmness, confidence, and self-possession. Imagine someone walking into a meeting or a social gathering, and with each step they are deliberate, aware, and unhurried. Every gesture, from placing a hand on the table to turning towards someone while listening, becomes a subtle but powerful assertion of value. Even small movements, like tilting your head slightly when listening or pausing before you respond, create an aura of thoughtful control. The brain of the observer picks up on these microsignals instantly and often subconsciously. They start to perceive you as someone who is not easily rattled, someone who is decisive and commanding, and this perception alone elevates your value in any social or professional context. Eye contact is one of the most potent tools in establishing presence. When used correctly, it can communicate confidence, intelligence, and dominance. Humans are wired to detect subtle cues in the eyes, and prolonged steady eye contact signals honesty and assurance. But it's not about staring aggressively. It's about a calm, unwavering focus that communicates you are fully engaged and unafraid. When someone speaks and you listen with deep, steady eye contact, they feel both acknowledged and subtly evaluated. This sends a signal of authority because you are silently demonstrating that you are attentive, discerning, and in control of the interaction. Conversely, avoiding eye contact or darting your gaze around conveys insecurity or submission. Mastery of presence means developing the ability to use your eyes not just to see, but to project awareness, curiosity, and quiet dominance simultaneously. Energy plays a central role in presence. Every person emits a subtle energy that others instinctively pick up on, whether it's confidence, nervousness, warmth, or tension. Those who master presence learn to regulate and project their energy in a way that commands attention and respect. Calm, measured, and controlled energy is magnetic. It tells people that you are composed, unshakable, and self-reliant. On the other hand, frantic, scattered, or desperate energy pushes people away, signaling neediness or lack of control. Mastering presence involves cultivating a grounded, centered energy that remains steady regardless of external chaos. It's the difference between walking into a room and immediately shifting the mood versus blending into the background. People are drawn to those who radiate self-possession because it feels safe, powerful, and attractive on a subconscious level. Voice is another subtle yet crucial component of presence. Even when the goal is to be silent, the tone, pace, and volume of your voice when you do speak can reinforce your presence. A calm, measured tone, without rushing words or filling sentences with unnecessary phrases, signals authority and control. Silence, in particular, is a powerful tool that gives weight to your words when you do speak and allows your presence to resonate without relying on constant verbal input. People often underestimate the psychological impact of controlled speech and pauses. The ability to use silence intentionally, letting your body language and energy do most of the talking, enhances your presence exponentially. Presence is also about awareness of the environment and the people within it. Those who are truly present are fully attuned to the dynamics of the room. They notice subtle cues, tension in a conversation, shifts in mood, unspoken social hierarchies, and adjust their behavior accordingly. This situational awareness allows you to navigate social and professional spaces with confidence and influence. People are drawn to individuals who seem to understand the unspoken rules of interaction because it signals intelligence, insight, and strategic thinking. Mastering presence means combining self-possession with perceptive observation, making you not only physically commanding, but socially and psychologically impactful as well. Another dimension of presence is consistency. People subconsciously assess your value over time by observing patterns in behavior, energy, and demeanor. Someone who is consistently calm, composed, and assertive builds an aura of reliability and trustworthiness. Conversely, unpredictable or erratic behavior diminishes perceived value and presence. Consistency in presence also means emotional regulation, avoiding visible panic, overreaction, or insecurity. The ability to remain steady under pressure is a signal to others that you are in control of yourself and, by extension, your environment. This silent authority draws people in, inspires respect, and elevates your perceived social and personal value without a word being spoken. Finally, mastering presence is about intentionality. Every posture, movement, glance, and pause should have purpose. This doesn't mean being robotic or overthinking every action, but rather being conscious of the signals you emit. When your presence is intentional, people subconsciously recognize it, and it impacts their perception of your value. They sense that you operate from a place of self-awareness and control, which is inherently attractive, commanding, and persuasive. Presence, when fully mastered, is a blend of body, energy, awareness, and subtle influence, a silent magnetic force that elevates your status in any room or interaction. Controlling your energy is the secret weapon that separates ordinary people from those who naturally command respect, influence, and attention. Energy is the invisible aura that you project into the world, and it has a profound impact on how others perceive you. Most people underestimate its power because it is intangible. They focus on words, looks, or superficial charm, not realizing that energy is the signal that communicates your inner state to the world. Every thought, emotion, and intention emits vibrations that others pick up on instantly, even if they are not consciously aware of it. When you learn to control your energy, you control the impressions, reactions, and behaviors of the people around you, often without speaking a single word. It is one of the most potent, subtle, and psychologically advanced tools you can master, and it is what allows some people to silently dominate any room they enter. Energy control begins with awareness. We must first understand that your energy is constantly broadcasting signals. Anxiety, fear, insecurity, overexcitement, or desperation radiate outward, drawing attention and shaping interactions in ways you may not intend. Conversely, calmness, confidence, and composed self-assurance are equally detectable and highly magnetic. Humans are wired to sense these cues because, on a primal level, we are constantly assessing the strength, status, and intentions of others for survival. A person who appears calm under pressure is perceived as strong, capable, and unthreatened by the chaos around them, and this perception elevates their social and psychological value. Awareness of this dynamic is the first step because you cannot control what you do not notice. Becoming mindful of the energy you project requires observing yourself during interactions, reflecting on how others respond to you, and identifying moments when your energy may betray insecurity or lack of control. Once you are aware of your energy, the next step is regulation. Emotional self-regulation is not about suppressing feelings, but about managing how they manifest externally. People who master their energy understand that emotions are signals to themselves, not invitations for impulsive reactions. When a challenging situation arises, most people react automatically, allowing their inner turmoil to dictate their behavior. This can manifest as rushing words, fidgeting, over-apologizing, or displaying nervous gestures. All of these signal weakness or lack of control, regardless of what you are saying. In contrast, controlling your energy means taking a deliberate pause, grounding yourself, and consciously projecting calmness and composure. When you do this, even under pressure, others perceive you as unshakable and in command. This psychological effect is profound. Calm energy induces respect, draws attention, and makes people unconsciously defer to you. A core element of energy control is the management of intensity. Too much energy, such as excessive excitement or over-eagerness, signals neediness or desperation. People instinctively resist individuals who appear too intense because it threatens the social balance and forces them to respond to another person's uncontrolled state. On the other hand, too little energy, such as low enthusiasm or disinterest, signals weakness, apathy, or a lack of presence. Mastering energy requires finding the delicate balance of intensity, a controlled, deliberate, and magnetic energy that attracts attention without overwhelming others. It is the energy of someone who is fully alive, engaged, and confident, yet unthreatened and self-contained. This balance creates intrigue and positions you as someone worth noticing, valuing, and following. Another aspect of controlling energy is emotional independence. Many people unconsciously tether their energy to the reactions of others. If someone criticizes them, they become defensive. If someone compliments them, they inflate with ego. This constant fluctuation signals instability and unpredictability, which reduces perceived value. People with strong energy control remain anchored within themselves, independent of external validation or provocation. They respond to events rather than react. This creates an aura of power because they are not easily influenced or manipulated. Others sense this inner stability and are drawn to it, often projecting admiration, respect, or even a desire to please onto the person without realizing why. This is a subtle but extremely potent psychological leverage that comes directly from mastering your energy. Physical grounding is a practical technique to maintain energy control. Energy is not just a mental state, it manifests physically. Tension in the muscles, shallow breathing, restless movements, and tightness in posture all transmit signals of anxiety or instability. Conversely, deep, steady breathing, relaxed yet firm posture, and fluid movements communicate inner calm and control. Techniques such as controlled breathing, mindfulness, and deliberate body awareness help anchor energy and prevent emotional turbulence from leaking into outward behavior. The more consistent and intentional your physical energy is, the more others will unconsciously read you as strong, composed, and influential. Even a brief pause, a slow gesture, or a steady gaze can transmit more power than hours of verbal persuasion. Energy control is also about presence in the moment. People who scatter their attention or mentally drift project weak energy because their focus is divided. Those who fully inhabit the present moment, however, project confidence, alertness, and authority. Being fully present allows your energy to dominate subtly but unmistakably. Others may not articulate why they are drawn to you, but they feel your focused, deliberate energy, and it creates a magnetic pull. This is why top performers, leaders, and influential figures always seem to command attention effortlessly. They have mastered the ability to channel their energy into every moment, making everything they do more impactful and significant without needing to speak excessively. Silence is another tool in controlling energy. Most people fear silence, seeing it as a void that must be filled with words. Yet silence is one of the most powerful ways to project controlled energy. When you do not rush to speak, laugh, or react, your energy dominates the space by default. Others fill the silence with thoughts about you, assigning meaning, value, or status without your intervention. Controlled silence signals confidence, self-possession, and restraint, all of which elevate perceived power and value. The person who can remain calm, silent, and observant in tense or uncertain situations becomes a psychological anchor for everyone around them, and this creates an unspoken influence that is far stronger than words alone. Controlling energy also means learning to manage the projection of emotions strategically. Not every emotional reaction should be expressed, and some should be amplified for maximum psychological impact. For instance, subtle displays of amusement, curiosity, or mild surprise can create intrigue and draw people in, while overt displays of anger, frustration, or excitement can push people away or make you seem uncontrolled. Mastery involves calibrating your energy to the social environment and the psychological responses you wish to evoke. This is a sophisticated but highly effective method to influence others without saying a word, because your energy in its measured form communicates more than any sentence ever could. Another critical factor is the deliberate use of space and boundaries. Your energy communicates not only through how you carry yourself, but also through how you occupy physical and social space. Those with strong energy do not shrink to fit into others' expectations. They expand intentionally, creating subtle dominance without aggression. They set invisible boundaries that signal respect for themselves and command respect from others. People unconsciously register these boundaries and perceive the person as confident, powerful, and self-assured. This careful management of space, combined with controlled energy, results in a silent authority that elevates status and influence effortlessly. Finally, controlling energy requires continual self-reflection and practice. It is not something achieved overnight because most people are unconsciously reactive. Mastery comes from observing your habitual energy patterns, identifying where you leak tension or insecurity, and deliberately practicing presence, composure, and intentionality. The reward is profound. Once you consistently control your energy, interactions become effortless, influence becomes automatic, and your silent power grows exponentially. People will seek your presence, value your attention, and respond to you in ways that reinforce your authority, all because you have learned to regulate and project your energy at the highest level. The power of observation is one of the most overlooked skills in the arsenal of influence, silent authority, and personal value. Most people go through life reacting rather than observing, speaking rather than listening, and acting without understanding. Those who master observation, however, see the world differently. They notice subtleties in behavior, tone, and micro-expressions that most people miss, giving them an almost supernatural ability to predict, influence, and control interactions. Observation is not passive. It is a deliberate, active process of gathering information, understanding motives, and reading unspoken signals. When you use the power of observation correctly, you gain insight into what people want, fear, and value. And this knowledge allows you to operate from a position of quiet authority. People may not realize why they respond to you the way they do, but your understanding of them gives you an invisible advantage in every interaction. Observation begins with attention to detail. Most people only see what is obvious: the words someone speaks, the gestures they make consciously, or the superficial behavior they display. A skilled observer, however, notices the small, almost imperceptible signs that reveal deeper truths. The twitch of an eye, a fleeting change in tone, a subtle hesitation before answering, these are the clues to someone's true state of mind, desires, or intentions. When you cultivate the habit of noticing these details, you start to perceive patterns in human behavior. You recognize when someone is bluffing, masking insecurity, or manipulating, and this awareness allows you to respond strategically. The human brain is wired to pick up on these cues subconsciously, and when you consciously observe and interpret them, your influence over interactions grows exponentially. Another essential aspect of observation is understanding context. Every action, word, or gesture occurs within a social and psychological framework. Observing behavior without context is meaningless. The same smile, frown, or pause can indicate completely different things depending on the situation. Skilled observers not only notice behavior but interpret it relative to the environment, the social dynamics, and the personal history of the people involved. This allows them to distinguish between genuine emotion and performance, between strategic manipulation and sincere reaction. The ability to contextualize what you see gives your observation immense power because you are not reacting blindly, you are responding based on understanding. Listening is a crucial component of observation. Most people hear words but fail to listen. They focus on what they want to say next rather than understanding what is being communicated. Observant individuals, however, listen deeply, not just to the content of speech, but to tone, rhythm, and emphasis. They notice what is said and what is left unsaid. The gaps, pauses, and hesitations often reveal more than the words themselves. By tuning into these subtleties, you gain insight into the priorities, insecurities, and intentions of others. This allows you to craft responses, actions, and strategies that resonate more profoundly than words alone ever could, giving you an almost invisible influence over people's thoughts and decisions. Observation also involves emotional intelligence. Emotions are powerful drivers of human behavior, yet most people overlook them or fail to recognize their significance. Observant individuals detect emotional undercurrents and understand how they shape interactions. Anger, frustration, insecurity, desire, and admiration all have unique signatures in body language, tone, and microexpressions. By noticing and interpreting these signals, you gain the ability to influence outcomes subtly. You can provide reassurance to calm insecurity, subtly challenge ego without provoking anger, or feed admiration to increase someone's attachment or respect. This strategic reading and responding to emotional cues give you a psychological advantage, making people respond to you in ways they often cannot articulate. Microexpressions are another layer of observation. These fleeting, involuntary facial expressions reveal a person's true feelings in the split second they occur. Most people miss them entirely, but skilled observers catch them and use them to decode hidden emotions and intentions. Recognizing micro-expressions allows you to adjust your approach instantly, whether it means retreating, pressing forward, or redirecting the conversation. It is a silent negotiation where words are secondary and influence is exerted through understanding the unspoken truths of others. This gives you control over social dynamics and increases your perceived intelligence, authority, and insight without having to explain or justify yourself. Observation is not only about reading others, but also about understanding yourself. The way you project yourself, your energy, and your subtle cues are also under scrutiny by everyone around you. By observing your own behavior, posture, tone, and reactions, you can identify patterns that may weaken your presence or reduce your value. Self-observation allows you to refine your energy, responses, and body language to maximize influence. When combined with observation of others, this creates a feedback loop where you are constantly calibrating your behavior to produce the desired psychological effect. The more you observe, the more you understand both your own impact and the hidden motives of others, creating a powerful synergy that enhances your influence exponentially. Timing is another critical component of observation. Observant individuals recognize that influence is not just about what you say or do, but when you say or do it. The world is constantly in motion, and human behavior fluctuates with circumstances, moods, and social dynamics. By observing and waiting for the precise moment to act, speak, or intervene, you maximize the effect of your actions. A single well-timed word, gesture, or decision can have far more impact than constant effort or communication. Observation allows you to identify these opportunities, ensuring that your energy, actions, and words hit with precision and influence. This makes you appear almost prescient, someone who understands situations intuitively and acts with clarity and authority. Observation also sharpens strategic thinking. When you pay attention to patterns of behavior over time, you begin to understand motives, habits, and predictable responses. This allows you to anticipate reactions, plan interactions, and subtly manipulate outcomes without overt effort. People who lack observational skills react in real time, often impulsively and without insight. Observant individuals, however, are always several steps ahead, using the information they gather to create situations where outcomes naturally align with their goals. This level of psychological foresight creates the appearance of power and mastery, even when the methods are entirely subtle and invisible to those around you. Powerful observation requires patience and restraint. Most people rush to judgment, speak too soon, or act impulsively, revealing their lack of insight and weakening their influence. Those who master observation understand that silence and stillness often reveal more than words or action ever could. By patiently watching, listening, and analyzing, you gain knowledge that others will never see. People may underestimate you in the moment, but by the time they realize the depth of your understanding, you are already several moves ahead, shaping outcomes without effort. This strategic patience is a hallmark of silent influence and is directly tied to the ability to observe effectively. Observation also builds empathy and social intuition. By carefully watching how people react, express themselves, and interact with others, you gain insight into human desires, fears, and motivations. This allows you to navigate social hierarchies, alliances, and conflicts with subtlety and efficiency. You learn how to approach individuals, what to emphasize, and how to avoid triggering defensiveness or resistance. These skills make you seem socially intelligent, emotionally aware, and psychologically astute, all of which increase your perceived value, influence, and authority in any environment. Finally, the power of observation lies in its invisibility. Unlike overt action or speech, observation is often unnoticed. People rarely realize that you are analyzing, interpreting, and anticipating their behavior. This invisibility allows you to operate with strategic freedom, adjusting your behavior to maximize influence while remaining beneath the conscious radar of others. You gather intelligence silently, influence subtly, and act decisively. Those who master observation create an aura of wisdom, authority, and psychological power, not because they speak loudly or dominate conversations, but because they understand the world and the people in it more deeply than anyone else in the room. Scarcity is one of the most powerful psychological levers you can use to increase your perceived value, influence, and authority. Human brains are wired to assign more value to things that are rare, limited, or difficult to obtain, and this principle extends directly to social interactions, personal relationships, and professional dynamics. Most people, however, operate under the assumption that being constantly available, constantly communicative, and constantly visible will make them liked or respected. The exact opposite is true. When you are always present, always eager, and always accessible, people take you for granted. Your attention loses its value, and your influence diminishes. Mastering scarcity means understanding this hidden law of human behavior and using it strategically to enhance your personal and social power. When people feel that your time, attention, or presence is limited, their perception of your worth automatically increases, and this increase occurs at a deep psychological level that is almost impossible to fake. Scarcity begins with deliberate absence. The simplest and most effective method to create scarcity is to limit your availability. This does not mean withdrawing entirely or acting aloof without purpose. Instead, it means choosing when, where, and with whom to invest your time and energy. People who are constantly available signal neediness and lack of control. Their energy becomes diluted, their value diminishes, and others unconsciously perceive them as less significant. By contrast, when you are selective, deliberate, and intentional about your presence, people begin to notice. They sense that you are a resource, not an obligation, and they assign higher value to your attention, time, and interaction. This is a subtle but incredibly powerful form of psychological influence because scarcity inherently creates desire, and desire is the engine of attention, respect, and pursuit. Scarcity also relies on unpredictability. When your presence is consistent but predictable, people become comfortable and may take your influence for granted. Introducing subtle unpredictability without being erratic or unreliable enhances perceived value. This could be as simple as not immediately responding to messages, occasionally declining invitations, or varying the times you engage in social or professional interactions. The brain notices these variations, even subconsciously, and interprets them as signs of independence, control, and higher status. When someone cannot fully predict or anticipate your behavior, they unconsciously invest more attention, curiosity, and energy into you. This is the psychological essence of scarcity. The less available, the more desirable, and the more people will unconsciously compete for your time and engagement. Scarcity is also deeply tied to the perception of exclusivity. Humans are naturally drawn to things that are not available to everyone. Whether it is social influence, professional opportunities, or personal attention, people inherently assign higher value to what they believe is rare or exclusive. This is why elite clubs, limited editions, and VIP access work so effectively. They tap into the brain's scarcity instinct. In personal and social contexts, this principle applies directly to your presence and behavior. By being selective about who you interact with, the environments you enter, and the commitments you make, you create a sense of exclusivity. People notice, consciously or subconsciously, that you are not accessible to just anyone, and this enhances your perceived status and influence. Scarcity, when combined with intentional exclusivity, makes your attention a coveted commodity, and people naturally treat it with more respect. The power of scarcity also extends to silence. In a world where everyone constantly talks, posts, messages, and shares, the person who occasionally remains silent stands out. Silence creates a void that others instinctively fill with projection, curiosity, and intrigue. When you speak selectively, your words carry weight, your presence resonates, and your influence grows. People assign higher value to your contributions because they are not constant, predictable, or taken for granted. Silence, when paired with scarcity, amplifies psychological influence because it triggers the brain's innate desire to seek out, understand, and engage with what is rare or missing. Your absence, both in speech and presence, becomes a tool that increases your perceived importance. Scarcity also leverages the concept of opportunity cost. People constantly make mental calculations about what they can and cannot have. When you are too available, your perceived cost is low, and people unconsciously assign less importance to your attention or presence. When you create scarcity, however, the perceived cost rises. People begin to recognize that gaining access to you requires effort, patience, or strategy, and this makes your attention more valuable. The human mind inherently equates effort with worth. If someone must invest energy or attention to connect with you, your perceived value rises. This principle is fundamental to social influence because it shifts interactions from one-sided availability to one in which others are motivated to actively seek and earn your engagement. Scarcity also interacts with social proof. When people observe that others respect, pursue, or value you, and they notice that your presence is limited, their desire to gain your attention intensifies. Scarcity amplifies the effect of social proof because the combination of rarity and perceived value triggers stronger psychological responses. People instinctively assign higher worth to someone who is both sought after and selectively present. This is why high-value individuals in any field, whether social, professional, or personal, appear magnetic. They are not constantly accessible, they are not desperate for validation, and their attention is earned rather than given freely. This creates a cycle where scarcity feeds influence, influence feeds attention, and attention reinforces perceived value. Another critical aspect of scarcity is the emotional reaction it triggers. When someone perceives that what they want, their attention, your time, or your approval is limited, it naturally triggers desire, urgency, and even subtle anxiety. The human brain is wired to respond to scarcity with heightened focus and motivation. This is why limited time offers, exclusive events, and rare opportunities are so compelling. Scarcity triggers a psychological urgency that increases engagement and perceived importance. When you embody this principle socially or professionally, people unconsciously assign more value to your presence and opinions because they recognize that it is not always available. The tension created by scarcity heightens attention, respect, and influence in ways that constant availability never could achieve. Scarcity also intersects with self-respect and boundaries. People who are constantly available or overly accommodating often signal a lack of self-worth. When you establish scarcity, you are implicitly communicating that your time, energy, and presence are valuable resources that are not to be squandered. This is a form of non-verbal authority. Without saying a word, you demonstrate that you understand your own value and demand that others recognize it as well. People respond to this instinctively because they are wired to respect strength, self-possession, and independence. By maintaining scarcity, you are setting boundaries that elevate your social and psychological standing, making others treat you with the respect and consideration that aligns with your value. Scarcity also works in combination with unpredictability of presence and strategic engagement. High-value individuals rarely operate on autopilot. They strategically choose when to appear, when to engage, and when to withhold. This deliberate approach creates an aura of mystery and desirability because people cannot predict your behavior. The brain interprets this unpredictability as a sign of higher intelligence, control, and independence. People are unconsciously drawn to those who appear self-contained, selective, and deliberate in their actions because these qualities signal competence, authority, and social worth. Scarcity and unpredictability together amplify perceived value, influence, and psychological control in a way that is almost impossible to resist. Finally, scarcity is reinforced by consistency and credibility. People only assign value to limited things when the limitation is credible. If someone claims to be rare, unavailable, or selective, but is in reality constantly accessible, the effect is lost and your influence diminishes. True scarcity is subtle, consistent, and strategically applied. It is not about acting aloof for attention or creating artificial barriers. It is about understanding your value, managing your presence, and controlling access to yourself in a deliberate and authentic way. When practiced correctly, scarcity amplifies your perceived authority, social standing, and influence, making people treat your attention, time, and presence as rare and valuable commodities that must be earned. The ultimate psychological insight behind increasing your value without saying a word lies in understanding that human perception is driven far more by subtle cues, energy, and behavior than by verbal communication. People constantly evaluate each other on levels that go unnoticed by the conscious mind, and these evaluations determine social hierarchies, influence, attraction, and respect. Every glance, movement, pause, and gesture sends signals that the brain interprets and uses to assign value. This is why some people seem magnetic, commanding, or respected without ever needing to assert themselves overtly, while others, despite talking constantly or working hard to impress, remain unnoticed or undervalued. The integration of presence, energy control, observation, and scarcity reveals a universal principle. Influence and value are not earned by words alone, but by the silent, psychologically calibrated signals you emit consistently and deliberately. Understanding this gives you a distinct advantage over those who operate blindly in social or professional environments. At the core of this insight is the idea that humans are wired to respond to cues of competence, control, and scarcity. Presence communicates control and competence through posture, movement, gaze, and composure. Energy signals emotional stability, confidence, and self-possession, influencing how people feel around you. Observation provides understanding and allows you to anticipate, influence, and navigate social dynamics strategically. Scarcity amplifies perceived value because humans inherently desire what is limited or difficult to obtain. When these elements are combined, they create a silent yet undeniable psychological force that elevates your status and influence in any environment. This is not about manipulation in a negative sense. It is about understanding and leveraging universal patterns of human psychology to command respect, attention, and value effortlessly. Presence serves as the foundation of this psychological architecture. When you master the art of presence, you occupy space, signal confidence, and project authority without needing to speak. Humans are instinctively drawn to individuals who carry themselves with self-possession because it triggers primal assessments of strength, competence, and stability. These assessments happen instantly, often before conscious thought, and they shape first impressions, social influence, and ongoing perceptions. A person who walks into a room with awareness, calmness, and deliberate movement communicates control over themselves and their environment. This silent signaling lays the groundwork for all subsequent psychological effects because people will naturally give more attention, respect, and deference to someone who appears fully in control of their own presence. Energy control deepens the effect of presence. While posture and behavior communicate outward signals, energy communicates your internal state to others. Humans are exquisitely sensitive to emotional energy. Even subtle shifts in mood, tension, or confidence are registered and interpreted subconsciously. By mastering your energy, remaining calm under pressure, projecting stability, and controlling intensity, you shape how people feel in your presence. Your energy becomes a vehicle for influence that surpasses words. People instinctively mirror, respond to, and are attracted to controlled energy. They unconsciously equate emotional composure with competence, reliability, and higher status. Those who fail to regulate their energy inadvertently signal weakness, neediness, or volatility, undermining their perceived value despite any verbal effort to impress. Observation complements presence and energy by providing the knowledge needed to act strategically. Humans do not exist in isolation. They are part of social ecosystems governed by desires, fears, hierarchies, and subtle behavioral patterns. Observation allows you to read these dynamics accurately and anticipate how others will respond to your presence, energy, or scarcity. By noticing micro-expressions, tone shifts, hesitations, and behavioral patterns, you gain insight into the hidden motivations of those around you. This knowledge allows you to modulate your behavior intentionally, ensuring that your presence, energy, and actions align with the responses you wish to evoke. Observation transforms passive awareness into strategic intelligence, amplifying your influence without requiring overt action or verbal persuasion. Scarcity, when integrated with presence, energy control, and observation, becomes a multiplier of perceived value. Humans inherently desire what is limited, exclusive, or difficult to obtain, and this principle applies directly to your presence, attention, and engagement. By controlling your availability, creating subtle unpredictability, and maintaining selective engagement, you trigger deep psychological responses in others, including desire, respect, and urgency. Scarcity magnifies the effects of all other points because it activates the brain's reward and valuation systems. When people perceive that your attention or presence is limited, they unconsciously assign higher worth to it, elevating your social and psychological status. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle where scarcity, presence, energy, and observation work together to increase your value invisibly yet powerfully. The integration of these principles reveals a profound psychological truth. Influence is earned not through effort or verbal assertion alone, but through subtle calibration of signals that the brain interprets automatically. People respond more to what you are than to what you say. When your posture communicates authority, your energy signals control, your observation guides strategic action, and your scarcity elevates perceived worth, you become someone whose value is recognized unconsciously by those around you. This is why high-value individuals often appear effortlessly magnetic. They have mastered the interplay of these psychological factors, and their influence is automatic, consistent, and compelling. A deeper understanding of this integration also highlights the role of perception versus reality. Value is often a perception rather than an absolute fact. You do not need to be the most skilled, the loudest, or the most accomplished to be treated as highly valuable. Instead, you need to manage how others perceive you through controlled presence, energy, observation, and scarcity. The brain assigns status, respect, and importance based on cues, signals, and behaviors, not on objective measures. By mastering these cues, you influence perception in a way that aligns with your goals, positioning you as someone of high value and authority, even if others are not consciously aware of the process. Furthermore, the interplay of these factors allows you to operate with subtlety and efficiency. You do not need to dominate conversations, manipulate aggressively, or constantly prove yourself. Influence emerges naturally when your presence is commanding, your energy is controlled, your observation is precise, and your scarcity is strategically applied. Others respond because their own psychology compels them to do so. Your behavior triggers instinctive responses of attention, respect, and desire. This method is far more powerful than brute force or verbal persuasion because it works beneath the surface of conscious thought, engaging the deep, automatic mechanisms of the human brain that govern social behavior. The integration of these points also provides a roadmap for personal growth and mastery. To increase your value without speaking, you must cultivate presence by owning your space and projecting confidence. You must regulate energy, maintaining composure, calmness, and stability in all circumstances. You must develop observation, learning to read people, anticipate reactions, and act strategically. Finally, you must embrace scarcity, managing availability and engagement to elevate perceived worth. Each element reinforces the others. Presence amplifies energy. Energy enhances observation. Observation informs strategic scarcity, and scarcity magnifies the psychological impact of all behaviors. Together, they create a framework for silent influence and high perceived value that is difficult to challenge or ignore. This psychological insight also explains why some people naturally attract attention, admiration, and respect while others struggle despite effort. Those who fail to recognize the subtle mechanics of human perception rely on overt behaviors, talking, bragging, or performing, rather than mastering the silent, psychological levers that truly drive value. Influence and status are rarely granted for loudness or effort alone. They are assigned based on cues, presence, energy, observation, and scarcity. Understanding this allows you to operate at a higher level, working with human psychology rather than against it, and achieving results that are disproportionate to the visible effort you expend. Another critical aspect is that these principles are universally applicable across social, professional, and personal contexts. Whether in the boardroom, social gatherings, online interactions, or intimate relationships, presence, energy control, observation, and scarcity shape how people perceive and respond to you. The more consciously you integrate these principles into your behavior, the more consistently you can command respect, increase influence, and elevate perceived value. This is why truly high-value individuals often appear effortless in multiple spheres. They are not relying on luck or charisma alone. They have internalized and strategically applied psychological laws that govern human perception and behavior. Finally, this integration teaches a subtle but powerful lesson about power itself. True power does not require dominance, coercion, or constant verbal assertion. It emerges naturally when your presence, energy, observation, and scarcity align, creating a silent authority that others recognize instinctively. People feel compelled to respond, respect, and engage because these elements trigger deep psychological instincts related to status, value, and social hierarchy. The beauty of this insight is that it allows you to increase influence and perceived value without conflict, effort, or force. It is a form of psychological mastery that works quietly but relentlessly, positioning you as someone who is valued, respected, and influential in ways that words alone could never achieve.